Welcome to Block 49 of our Celebrating the States Block of the Month. This is our version of the New Mexico block. For this block, you will need 3 fabrics, a light, a medium, and a dark. From the light, cut 1 strip that's 1 1/4 inches by the width of fabric. Cut that on the fold for 2 rectangles that are 1 1/4 inches by at least 18 inches. From a 1-inch strip of fabric, cut at least a 12-inch section. You will also need to cut 6 squares that are 3 inches by 3 inches. From the medium fabric, cut 2 rectangles that are 1 1/2 by 10 1/2 inches and 2 rectangles that are 1 1/2 inch by 12 1/2 inch. You also need to cut 4 squares that are 3 inches by 3 inches. From the dark fabric, you need to cut 2 rectangles that are 1 1/4 inches by at least 12 inches. You will need 1 strip of fabric that's 1 inch wide by at least 18 inches long. You will also need 2 squares that are 3 inches by 3 inches and 5 squares that are 2 1/2 inches by 2 1/2 inches. Once everything is cut, it's time to start sewing. Please use 1/4 inch seam allowances unless otherwise directed. We're going to start by making strip sets. Sew the dark 1 inch by 18 inch strip between the light 1 1/4 inch by 18 inch strips. Sew the light 1 inch by 12 inch strip between the dark 1 1/4 inch by 12 inch strips. To prevent my strip sets from curving when I was done, I always sewed with the dark fabric on top. If you've been following along for all 4 years on our Celebrating the States Block of the Month, let us know in the comment section below how many blocks you've made. Also, have you made it in red, white, and blue, or have you used another colorway? We'd love to hear from you. For the strip sets, press towards the dark fabric. Once pressed, both strip sets should measure 2 1/2 inches wide. If your strip sets need some convincing to lay flat, use some Mary Ellen's Best Press spray to help them. Now we need to subcut the strip sets for the small 9-patch units. From the 12-inch long strip set that has the light fabric in the center, cut 8 sections that are 1 1/4 inch wide. I started by cutting at the 5-inch mark, then the 3 3/4 inch mark, the 2 1/2 inch mark, and finally the 1 1/4 inch mark. I did that 2 times. From the 18-inch strip set that has the dark fabric in the center, cut 4 sections that are 1 inch wide and 4 sections that are 2.5 inch wide. Set aside the 2.5 inch squares, and then we'll take all the little tiny pieces back to the sewing machine to make little tiny 9 patches. Sew the 1 inch light sections between the 1 1/4 inch dark sections. You will end up with 4 9-patch units. I know these pieces are small, but you can do this. You can stop here and press towards the dark side, or you can keep sewing and then press once at the end. These little tiny 9 patches are so cute, and the worst part of the sewing is over because all the rest of the pieces will be bigger than this. Press away from the center row, and I highly suggest using some spray starch to help these lay flat. Next, we're going to sew with all the 3-inch squares. You have 2 dark squares and then 4 of the medium squares, and you're going to put a light square on top of each of those squares. Then we're going to either draw a line corner to corner, or you can use diagonal seam tape, and then you're going to sew on both sides of the center line. Once you've sewn on both sides of that center line, you want to cut them apart and then cut on the line. You will end up with half square triangle blocks, 4 that are using the dark and light fabrics, and 8 that are made from the medium and light fabrics. Press all of these away from the light fabric. Once you're done, it's time to head to the cutting table to trim each of these units to 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. My block lock ruler is really going to help me make these blocks perfect, and there won't be a lot to trim off, but just a little on all 4 sides. You can always use your favorite method to make half square triangle blocks. These need to measure 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. Next, we're going to sew the 2.5 inch dark squares to the 2.5 inch subcuts. You should not be sewing over any seams, so if you are, it's time to get the seam ripper out. Set 2 of those units aside and then sew the other 2 to opposite sides of a dark 2.5 inch center square. Press all of these away from the dark squares. Next, we're going to make the start points for the 4 corners. Start by sewing half square triangle blocks together, one that has the dark fabric and one that has the medium fabric. Make sure you're always sewing the light fabric to the medium fabric. Press towards the medium fabric. Sew the 2.5-inch 9-patch units to the remaining medium half-square triangle blocks. You can lay this out with the piece that we just got done sewing to make sure your triangles are pointed in the right direction. Press towards the medium triangle unit. I found this unit easiest to press from the wrong side. Sew the 2 units together to get the star point corners. They should all look exactly the same. Now, at this point, you can stop and press, or if you are like me and were anxious to get the block done, you can add in the sashing pieces that go between the 2 corners. If you have pressed as shown up to this point, you should have seams that nest together to help make sewing these smaller pieces much easier. Before we sew the rows together, it's time to press. I highly suggest pressing from the wrong side for these rows. I placed my center row wrong side up so I could use it as a guide to help me know how to press the outer rows. And because there's so many seams in such a small area, I use some Mary Ellen's Best Press spray to help everything lay nice and flat. Now it's just a matter of sewing the rows together, and while we're sewing the rows together, we're also going to sew the sashing on the outer edge all the way around. We're going to do the 2 shorter pieces while we're sewing the rows together, then we'll press one more time, and then we'll add the last 2 border pieces. Hopefully, if you've pressed everything right, all these seams will nest together. I took these seams really slow and just sewed a little bit at a time. Make sure when you're adding the border rectangles that you add it to the side with the star points and not with the 9 patches. Press towards the medium fabric and the center row. Once pressed, this should measure 12.5 inches across. Only 2 seams left and our New Mexico block is done. Yay! press towards the medium fabric, this block will measure 12.5 inches by 12.5 inches. I hope you enjoyed our version of the New Mexico block. Only one block to go and this project will be ready to put together. If you're enjoying our Celebrating the States Block of the Month, make sure to give us a thumbs up, share with your quilting friends, leave a comment for us, and subscribe. Thanks for watching and happy quilting!